Super Rugby round 17, the power rankings, and I've got a bunch of jerseys up on the wall um, from teams which didn't do all that good. Not all of them dead and buried, but not the best week anyway. The Chiefs actually, perhaps the most thankful because they're still in with a shout with the results the kind of way they went. So yeah, we'll start with the bottom, work our way up. Perhaps not as much movement this week, but there's a wee bit of movement in the middle. 15 are the Sunwolves. Kind of not surprising that they are towards the bottom of the board. They have been there for many weeks now. It's another loss. Their game against a much changed and slightly inexperienced Stormers team was still a loss, but it wasn't disgraceful. Masariwa is one of the best players in Super Rugby. So, yeah, they seem to have that every year, that they've got at least one guy who really does set the comp on fire. So, if nothing else, they had something to cheer about. Next, my Blues are down a spot into 14th. They lost to the Reds. It was close. It was away, but it was a battle of two teams near the bottom, and the Blues couldn't get it done. You probably don't deserve to be in the playoffs with that kind of record. So that's it for the Blues for another year. The Reds, on the other hand, have moved one up in the power rankings. They haven't quite passed the Blues on the board. I think the Blues, with that losing bonus point, stayed ahead just by one. But there is kind of very little between those teams, as was evident in the game between them. So good on the Reds. They got a win. But yeah, it's not been the best season for those two teams, the Reds and the Blues. Next, the Waratahs lost to a top team, like the top team in the Aussie Conference, but they were at home. They needed the win to stay alive. They didn't get it. Disappointing. They're not down. It's the same spot they were in last week, but it's still the bottom row. Do they miss Falau? Probably. I think I saw some stats about him being worth X amount of points to the log. But yeah, either way, they're going to have to find a way without him, because that seems to be done and dusted, at least on the field. But yeah, that's them for the year as well. So these teams, not to be seen for much longer, just one more round for them. Next, hoping to get a bit more out of the Super Rugby comp this year, are the Rebels. I've got them the same as last week. Man, that was a bad result. 66-0. It doesn't get a lot worse. I think I said in the review, either they use that as kind of a rallying call to pull together and get a result, or their confidence is just absolutely shot and then they get trampled next week by the Chiefs. We will see what kind of reaction we get. They are hanging on to a playoff spot by a thread. But if they lose it, with the Chiefs on the points difference they are on, then the Rebels are done. So it's kind of a one-game shootout for the Rebels. And they have the pressure on them, but we'll see if they can get it done. Next, the Highlanders are also static from last week. They had a draw, and it was a disappointing draw because they needed a win, and they did not get it done. So I've looked at the spots, and they're also on 31 points. So I think they're still in mathematically with a chance, but I think in all likelihood they are probably done for the season. They could already be done. I'm not sure. I think there's different permutations depending on what happens with the teams above them. I think it might require a draw, but then potentially a win with them getting a bonus point and another team not. Either way, I think they're pretty much done. So, yeah. If they picked up a win, they would definitely still be alive in the race, but it was a draw, and they should be disappointed. Static on my board anyway. Next, the Sharks. Speaking of disappointed, I've got them down 2. It was an away trip to Argentina to play a very informed Jaguares side, and yeah, they didn't upset them, and it wasn't close in the end. It was a pretty big score, I think 27 points, which was a bit of a hiding in the end. So disappointing for the Sharks. They're also in a one-game shootout with the Stormers. We'll see what they can show us in that last week. Next, Chiefs. Like I said, pretty lucky. They're still alive. I got them as the same as last week. They had the bye, and they're still alive. So what more could they ask for, I suppose? Next, the Lions. I have got at 7. The Lions down 2 spots. That was a home game. They needed to show a bit more than that. I thought some of the ref calls were a bit... Like the 50-50s didn't go their way, but the points difference in the end was 20 points. So it probably wasn't 20 points worth of 50-50 calls. So Hurricanes deserving winners. Lions, if they have to go somewhere tough, I mean they've got a pretty good record against the Jaguares. They beat them in the playoffs last year, although it was in Joburg rather than Argentina. So can they make it past the quarterfinal? I'm not convinced. Their defense has been a bit leaky this year, but hey, they're higher than some of the other teams around them. And yeah, that has them down 2, by the way. Stormers, I've got up 3 spots, which seems ridiculous given they only beat the Sunwolves and they didn't even manage to get a bonus point. But so many of the teams around them lost or drew. So yeah, the Highlanders drew, the Rebels lost, the Sharks lost, the Chiefs had a bye, Lions lost. It was more about that than anything else. A win is still a win. It's still 4 points. They'll be disappointed that it couldn't get a 5th. But again, 1-game shootout with the Sharks. We'll see what the Stormers team is made of. The Bulls somehow are up a spot. Those 2 draws they got in New Zealand kind of counts as a win. It's perhaps more than they were expected to get when they lost their last home game before going on tour. They were kind of looking at 6s and 7s, but they've pulled things relatively right. And yeah, I think overall, compared to last season, you'd be looking at this season and saying pretty decent stuff from the Bulls. So yeah, up 1 spot. Even though it was only a draw, it was still a well-earned draw, and it's kept them in the hunt for sure. Next, the Brumbies. The Brumbies are unlucky not to be in the top 3 because they are on one heck of a run. It's another result for them. Again, it was against the team kind of near the bottom, but still, it was an away win, and they did pretty well, looked pretty impressive. But trouble for them is these guys also got a win. And these guys, with that result, can also feel unlucky not to be higher than they are because it doesn't get much better than 66-0, even though it was at home. Still, it was a decent Rebels team, not a poor team, and they thrashed them. Why aren't they in second? Because they went away from home and got a 20-point win over a decent Lions team. So, yeah, they also had a very good week. They had a good week, they had a good week, they had a good week, and they also had a good week. Bonus point win at home over the Sharks. 27-point victory. All those top 4 teams did really well. The bottom of the barrel kind of didn't do that good. The Reds kind of bucked that trend, but it was against another pretty poor team. So on most other weeks, the Crusaders, Hurricanes, Brumbies would have gone up. But I couldn't do much with the numbers this week. The way I kind of measure it is based on a few factors, home and away. Did they win? Did they lose? The margin. But with the margin, I only really look at, was it close? Was it normal? Or was it big? And the Jaguares had a pretty big win as well. It wasn't as big as 66 points, but I don't have a category kind of past big. So once you get past like 30 points or 25 points, it doesn't really make much of a difference how many more you score. Maybe that's something I should look at for coming seasons. Anyway, those are the power rankings for round 17.